There has to be some common sense.
Yes, sir. They have the car stopped at 10th and Ranch by Kohberger.
We still don't know who pulled the trigger. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Police Off the Cuff Real Crime Stories. I'm your host, retired NYPD Sergeant Bill Cannon, a 27-year veteran of the NYPD. Folks, in the last two nights, we covered sort of in great depth the same story that CBS's 48 Hours was covering. And of course, that was the Idaho quadruple case of Ethan Chapin, Zana Canardle, Madison Mogan, and Kaylee Consalvis. And on the same night, they actually covered the Gilgo case with, of course, the arrest of Rex Heuermann. These cases are very complicated in themselves. So they didn't really take the cases on, but rather they did a more human look at the cases. By that, I mean they spoke to the parents of Kaylee Consalvis and let us have a look inside. And of course, the parent of Zana Canardle. And it was very touching to see this. And at the same time, while this is going on, we look into the day-to-day of what's happening in the courtroom. And of course, the big argument of what's going on in the courtroom right now is cameras in the courtroom. Should there be cameras chronicling the everyday happenings inside this courtroom once the trial starts? And there's a great deal of argument over that. I believe the defense does not want cameras in the courtroom. And even in this case, the size of this case, the transparency so far in this case, I believe the prosecution really doesn't want it either. In my personal opinion, cameras in the courtroom are a huge distraction. And I think they distract the lawyers, the prosecutor, the judge, the jury, and everyone else, even the defendant, from acting the way they would act if there were not cameras there. And the broadcast media and journalists would argue that because of our system, we need to have a transparent look at our court system. However, if this affects whether or not a defendant can get a fair trial, then I think the judge has a no-brainer. In essence, he has to rule on the side of the defendant getting a fair trial and not allowing cameras inside the courtroom. However, it seems as though, and I'm not a mind reader, but it seems as though Judge, and of course his last name is Judge on the Idaho case, Brian Kohberger being the defendant who is facing, if convicted, the death penalty in Idaho by firing squad. So the stakes could not be higher. So the judge must decide whether or not he believes it to be fair for both the press and, more importantly, the defendant to have each day in that courtroom chronicled by the broadcast media and put out live and on tape for the whole world to see. In addition, there's a great deal of legal maneuvers in regards to discovery material. And of course, for those not familiar with that term, discovery is evidence, paperwork, every type of evidentiary item that the prosecution has, they must turn over to the defense in order for the defense to properly prepare the defense for the defendant to counteract the evidence that the prosecution wishes to put forward. The defense would argue in this case that, in essence, the sheath, the DNA on the knife sheath that was left behind allegedly by Brian Kohberger, that DNA was subject to the FBI putting together an investigative genealogical tree, which they believe the defense has every right to see the work they did in building that tree. As yet, the FBI has not turned over that evidentiary matter to the defense. So that's been an argument. The other case that 48 Hours covered was, of course, the Gilgo Beach case, and that's Rex Heuermann. The arrest of Rex Heuermann, going back, these cases went back to 2007. And the argument with this we presented was why why did it take 12 years for one of the most important evidentiary items in the case folder to be looked into? And of course, on the screen you see right now, these are known as the Gilgo Four. Maureen Brainerd Barnes, who was missing since July 2007. Melissa Bartolome, missing since 2009. Amberlynn Costello, missing since 2010. And Megan Waterman, missing since 2010. We presented evidence, and 48 Hours that also presented evidence in regards to Amber Costello and the fact that she was last seen, I believe it was in September of 2010. And a man fitting the description of Rex Heuermann, a man that was described as 6'4" to 6'6" tall, 250 to 300 pounds. And the eyewitness, a guy named David Schaller, said that he looked like an ogre. That was the exact language he used. That was the wording he used, an ogre. In addition, he identified a vehicle, a green Chevy Avalanche. And this was in September of 2010. And that information sat dormant inside this case folder. And according to David Schaller, the eyewitness to a man who fit the physical description of who we now know to be Rex Heuermann, that he had given that information to the police shortly thereafter Amber Costello disappeared. In addition, there was information back in 2012 that burner cell phones were pinging cell sites in Massapequa Park, New York, Manhattan, and other areas of Hauppauge and West Babylon, which two of the escorts went missing from those locations. Fast forward to 2022, 12 and a half years later. Rodney Harrison is appointed police commissioner of the Suffolk County Police. He does a deep dive into the case folder. He puts together a task force of detectives because when he got to Suffolk, he realized he didn't like that there was only one detective assigned to this huge case. So he puts together a task force that included the FBI, the New York State Police, the Suffolk County DA's office, the Suffolk County Sheriff's Office, and of course, the Suffolk County Police and the Suffolk County detectives. Within 6 weeks, a female detective from the state police, using a database called Lawman, identifies the green Chevy Avalanche and being registered to a man named Rex Heuermann, who lives in Massapequa Park, who owns an architectural business in Manhattan, near where these cell phone pings were occurring. We questioned last night on our show, myself and Professor Mike Geary, retired NYPD sergeant. Why did it take over 12 years for that bit of evidence to result in the identification of the alleged killer of all these women? Why did it take that long? And that's what the deep dive we took last night into that information as to why it took 12 years. And now we know that Rex Heuermann has been arrested and charged with three of those. Three of the Gilgo 4 on the screen. He's been charged with Melissa Bartolome, Amberlynn Costello, and Megan Waterman. The fourth, Maureen Brainerd Barnes, they're still working on evidence in that case to see if they can get the probable cause they need to charge the fourth one, thus being the Gilgo 4. Many, many questions. Many people think that the Gilgo case was doomed from the beginning because of corruption in the Suffolk County Police Department. That could be a factor. It could be a factor. We all know Chief Burke, the district attorney. Spoda is still in prison over matters of corruption. So this is the cases that 48 Hours featured the other night and that we took a dive into the last two nights. First, of course, we took a dive into the Idaho quadruple case. And then, of course, the Gilgo Beach case. So we'll continue to report on this because it's one of the biggest cases, two cases in the last, I don't know how many years. Very interesting. Or either case, what anyone would describe as a slam dunk. Anytime a case goes to a jury, it's never a slam dunk. Just remember that I told you that. Folks, this is Police Off the Cuff, giving you a couple shorts, a little synopsis on those two cases. The Moscow, Idaho quadruple, Ethan Chapin, Zaina Knodel, Madison Mogan, and Kaylee Gonzalez, and of course, the Gilgo Beach case. Have a great day, everyone.
One episode just ain't enough.